from the New York Times Learning Network. I'm Ross Flatt. We'd like to welcome you to How to Teach Review Writing with the New York Times. Now, people come to the New York Times for a lot of reasons, and reading our reviews can be one of the most informative and the most fun. Our critics can tell you which movies you might want to check out or avoid. Or our restaurant critics might tell you what restaurants are really worth spending your money on and which ones you might want to eat at home. You can check out the latest theater and dance artists. Or if you're interested in binge watching your next television show, everything from technology to children's books, nonfiction books, we have you covered at the Times. And that's really what today's webinar is all about. Review writing with the New York Times through our review contest. So at the Learning Network, we have an entire writing curriculum about analyzing arts, criticizing culture, and writing reviews with the New York Times. In this curriculum, we have writing prompts that help students become aware of the role of the arts and culture in their lives. We have a lesson plan around thinking critically by reading and writing culture reviews. We have several mentor texts, some of which we'll be exploring today, by adults and teenagers, where students can try out different review writers' moves. And finally, we have our review contest. And in a moment, we'll tell you more details about that. So in today's webinar, we're going to learn about the Student Review Contest and the resources that support it. You're going to explore writing prompts to get your students thinking about the art and culture they've experienced and how to write about it. We'll analyze mentor texts from past contest winners to identify writers' moves and key elements of reviews. And finally, we'll get some advice and best practices from New York Times critics on writing reviews. Today, we're going to be joined by Natalie Prue. She is a staff editor at the New York Times Learning Network. I would like to welcome Natalie. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, us too. So, Natalie, we're going to start with learning about the Student Review Contest and the different resources we have that support it. So, you've been running this Student Review Contest. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, for this contest, the premise is really simple. We are inviting middle school and high school students to play critic and submit an original review about any kind of creative expression covered in the Times.
All right, so all of our contests have a series and a set of rules. Can you walk us through these?
Yeah, so the main thing is we're inviting students to review something that the Times reviews. So whatever they review, it has to fit into one of the categories of creative expression that the Times reviews, and we'll go over that in just a bit. We also encourage students to experience something that's new to them and to actually experience it for themselves. So if they're writing a review about a movie, they should actually see the movie. And this contest is open to both middle school and high school students anywhere in the world. You have to be between the ages of 11 and 19 and be in middle and high school. And the reviews are short, 450 words or fewer, not including the title.
What are the different things that students can review? We talked about the different things that you can see in the Times. What can students do?
So the Times reviews 15 different categories of creative expression, and these include TV, architecture, books, restaurants, movies, art, video games, dance. There's so many opportunities to interview different things. And like I said, for this contest, students can review anything that falls into one of those categories. So what I mean by that is that a student, for example, could review Blackpink's latest album because they're a musical group and the Times reviews music, but they could not review the Santa Cruz Decks and Wheels because the Times does not write skateboard reviews.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so there's plenty to choose from, pretty much no matter where they live, no matter what they're doing. Lots of different options. Okay, so students write their reviews, they get them in time. How are they judged? What are the types of things students should keep in mind?
So our judges are going to be looking for 4 different things in the reviews that we get. So the first is that the review expresses an opinion and supports it with evidence. Next, we're looking for attention to detail. The review should present some relevant and accurate details. And then they also have to consider the audience. So thinking about the broad cross-section of audience of New York Times readers, but also taking into consideration who the creative work is intended for. And then finally, language. We want these to be fun and engaging to read. The review should have a really strong voice and engage the reader.
Okay. All right. So I can understand why I'd want to maybe write a review. I could see that being a lot of fun. I could see students doing this, a lot with something like, if they're reviewing restaurants on like Yelp or Seamless or something like that. But why should teachers encourage their students to teach review writing?
That's a good question, Ross, because this isn't really a traditional genre that you would teach in school, but it does relate a lot to the types of academic writing that students do in school. So for one, a review is just another form of an argumentative essay. You have to make a claim and support it with solid reasoning and evidence. And it's also deeply analytical. So just like with literature, when students are writing reviews, they have to read or watch or view or listen to something really closely. They have to understand its context, and they have to explain what is meaningful or interesting or not about it. And then with this contest, one of the major benefits that students get is that they have the opportunity to write for an authentic audience. They get the chance to share their opinions beyond their classroom walls. And then finally, review writing offers students choice. And this is pretty self-explanatory, but they can write about almost anything they want for this contest. And they have the chance to think deeply about the works of art and culture that matter most to them and communicate why to others. And this is a skill and a way of thinking that they can use not only in class, but in their lives outside of school too.
Okay, so I'm hearing that students are able to choose what they want to do. They're able to argue, and they're applying what they've learned to something that actually exists in the real world. So this has a lot of appeal for teenagers, both in middle and high school. All right, we have a couple student winners that you spoke to, I believe, a couple weeks ago, and we wanted to hear from them what it was like to not only win this contest, but what they learned from winning this contest. So we're going to hear from Henry Sal and Elizabeth Phelps. Let's take a look and a listen.
My name is Henry Shao. I go to school at West Windsor Plainsboro High School North in New Jersey, and I'm in 11th grade currently.
Hi, my name is Lizzie Phelps. I went to Poolsville High School, and I'm currently a first year at Wellesley College. When I wrote this review, I was a senior in high school.
How did you find out about this contest, and why did you decide to participate?
I found out about this contest through my English teacher, in fact. The previous school year, we were entered in, I believe, the editorial contest. The next year, on my own initiative, I searched for a different contest I could participate in, and in this case, I thought reviewing something would be fun.
I found out about the contest through my high school journalism class. We had an assignment to write a review of something, and we read some of the previous year's reviews, and my journalism teacher just really pushed for us to do it. It was an assignment, and then it was an extra 5 homework points to submit it to the contest.
What was your reaction to hearing that you were a finalist?
I was so excited. I wasn't expecting much, I was like, okay, I'll submit it, see what happens. And actually, I didn't know I was a finalist. And my friend texted me and was like, oh my God, congratulations. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? I don't know what this is. So then I checked my email and I was just so excited.
It's gratifying and really encouraging, especially when you're recognized for writing like this, because it really encourages you to keep on writing.
Do you have any advice you'd like to give to other young writers who might be applying to this contest in the future?
Pick something that you have strong feelings about. Because like I was saying earlier, that's really what propelled me to keep going and to make sure this review was as good as I thought it could possibly be, was that I didn't want to let Lizzo down.
No topic necessarily is the wrong topic. And I would argue that your point of view perhaps may be something extremely unique. If you have a unique story to tell, then by all means go out and tell it and share it with others.
Natalie, you spoke to these students. Anything else you want to add just from speaking to these students that teachers and students should kind of keep in mind if they're thinking about entering this contest?
I mean, I think they said it all, but you can see that having the effect of winning this contest can have a really strong impact on students' writing. But we also hear from students who didn't win, and just the opportunity to be able to write for an audience outside of their teacher is really motivating and engaging for students too.
Yeah, I don't imagine that you get a lot of opportunities to write about attending a Lizzo concert in high school. So this is a really great opportunity to do that. So let's talk a little bit about getting started, or maybe sort of warming up for review writing, whether you're entering this contest or not. So we're going to explore writing prompts to get your students thinking about the art and the culture they've experienced and how to write about it. So let's take a look at some of the writing prompts we have. So Natalie, can you tell us a little bit about what these writing prompts are and how we use them, how teachers can use them?
Yeah, so we suggest starting a unit on review writing with our writing prompts. We post a writing prompt every day of the school year that draws on an article in the Times. And for this contest, we wrote a few special ones to help out with helping students pick their topics, think about the role of reviews in their lives and things like that. So the first thing you might do is to have students consider what role reviews play in their everyday lives and in society at large. And this writing prompt, do you read reviews, in our unit plan, it prompts students to think about how they use reviews and why. And we hope that in this writing prompt, students start to see that too. And then after that, we have 3 other writing prompts that you can use to help students. So we have a prompt that asks students an experience that they recommend for people, another prompt that asks them what they would suggest others avoid, and then another one about things that they can start to brainstorm about, things they could experience that stretch their cultural imagination.
I can really imagine a student getting into these prompts. I mean, it basically we're saying, kind of practice writing a positive review, practice writing a negative review. And I could really imagine them just being so excited to tell people something that they have absolutely fallen in love with lately, or probably better yet, I probably would have done this at, 14, 15, 16 years old, is be like, this is what I hate and I want to tell everybody why. So these are great prompts that really get them going and get them working on that. Speaking of prompts, we are going to ask everybody to join us in our first interactive of today. What is something that you are interested in and feel strong about that you would want to review? We're going to come back to this in a little bit.
And seeing things like balance boards, cookware, food, hand sanitizer, movies, YA books. A Lake Street Dive Band, I love them. I hope you do too, and not that's something that you hate. Skincare products, backpacking, old movies, novels for English teachers. As a former English teacher myself, I definitely relied on reviews to figure out what to teach my students.
So we're going to come back to this in just a few minutes, but let's go ahead and move on. And that brings us to mentor texts. So we're going to spend some time analyzing mentor texts from past contest winners to identify different writers' moves and key elements of reviews. So we have our writing prompts, but what are mentor texts, Natalie, and how do we use them?
Yeah, so after your students consider the role of reviews and they start forming their opinions with those writing prompts, the next natural step would be to actually read reviews and learn from them. And that's where our mentor text series comes in. So we created this series of lesson plans that feature writing from both the Times and student winners of our contests, and they help students analyze and emulate that writing.
And then when they're analyzing this writing, they're emulating this writing, they're learning, we call them writer's moves. So can you just tell us like what this term writer's moves is, and then how this kind of like what we take from these moves when we're talking about using mentor texts?
Yeah, writer's moves are just the little things that writers do that make a big impact. So for example, using exciting language, or writing a strong introduction, or writing a claim. Those are what we mean by writer's moves. And each of our mentor texts dives into one of those skills and helps students see it in practice in Times writing or student writing, and then try it out for themselves in their own piece of writing.
All right, so why don't we take a look at some of those moves or those key elements. Can you tell us a little bit about elements that are specific to writing reviews?
Yeah, so for this unit, we have identified 4 key elements of review writing. This is not an exhaustive list. There are so many different writer's moves that review writers use, and you're going to hear about some of them later. But these are just sort of the basics, and they align really closely to the rubric that I introduced in the beginning. So the first is to express a critical opinion. We have another one that teaches students how to make an argument with descriptive details. We have another one that helps them use sensory images and exciting language. And then our last one helps them consider their different audiences for a review.
And so what we're going to do now is we're going to unpack each one of these elements. In some cases, we'll do an interactive that helps us practice these elements a little bit. Maybe it's something that you can take into your classroom, introduce to your students after today's webinar. So we're first going to talk a little bit about expressing a critical opinion. So like I said at the top of this webinar, the Times is no stranger to writing reviews, to having critics on staff, and we decided that we would go to one of our critics here at the Times, and that is A.O. Scott. So A.O. Scott is one of 2 chief film critics at the New York Times, and I spoke to him about expressing critical opinions and writing reviews. So why don't we take a look and a listen at what A.O. Scott had to say about that.
I would say the biggest piece of advice that I have, that I would have about reviewing is, and in a way it's just a definition of what reviewing is that you need to figure out what you think. A review is not just simply your opinion about something. It's not just, I like this, I thought this was bad, I thought this was good. That's not a review, that's not criticism, that's an opinion. It doesn't help anyone else figure anything out about that movie. If I just say, I didn't like the Avengers Endgame, I haven't told you anything that's useful to you if you're deciding what you think about that movie or whether you should see that movie or not. So what you have to do, the most important thing, is to figure out what your opinion is and how you're going to explain it to someone else. You have a reader who wants to know what you think and wants to know, this is the most important thing, why you think what you think. Why didn't you like that movie? Why did you like that movie? What was good about it? What was boring about it? What was exciting about it? Your job is to explain that, not just to state the opinion. Your opinion is valuable. It's your opinion. You have a right to it. But the only way you get anyone else interested in it is if you can explain it to them.
Now, Natalie, he brings up a lot of really good points there. He speaks specifically about movies, but I'm imagining this can apply to any kind of review. So anything that he said there that you might want to piggyback on?
I mean, I think he said it perfectly, but I'll just reiterate. A lot of times what we see in the contest submissions that we get is that students just end up summarizing a piece of work. But in a review, your job is really to say what your opinion about it is. And the best reviews don't just say, I loved this or I hated this. They actually make a claim. What did you like about the movie? Why did you hate it? And I think that's what A.O. Scott's really trying to get at. And that's what we're sort of going to explore here today.
So let's practice that a little bit. So what we're going to do is we are going to bring in a student mentor text. This one was on Lil Pump, and it was called Lil Pump, An Exercise in Genius Stupidity by David Chmielewski. I'm going to read this excerpt. And as I'm reading this excerpt, see if you can identify any critical opinions that David writes about here. There's a new major force in hip hop, mumble rap, a subgenre of rap that is characterized by songs with intense basses and little lyricism, performed by rappers with rowdy personalities. And if mumble rap was a feudal kingdom, Gazi Garcia, more commonly known as the rapper Lil Pump, would be one of its most important lords. Pump released his first commercial album, the cleverly titled Lil Pump, in October of 2017. Now, much like most mumble rap, two things are true about Lil Pump. It is exceedingly stupid, and yet at the same time, worth listening to. Again, as I read that, and I'll give everybody another few seconds, what critical opinions did this student share? And then Natalie, I'm gonna hand it over to you to see if you noticed anything in there.
You don't want it to only be summary, and you don't want it to only be opinion. You have to give a little context like the student does in their first paragraph, but you also need to say what you felt about it. And if I had to pick out one thesis statement in this piece, I would probably point to that last sentence where he says, now, much like most mumble rap, two things are true about Lil Pump. It is exceedingly stupid and yet at the same time worth listening to. So you really get a sense of his strong opinion there that, I mean, this isn't like genius or anything, but it's really fun to listen to. And we'll see later on how he further develops that claim and uses evidence to support it throughout the review.
It's a really interesting opinion that he has, but he doesn't really leave any ambiguity here. It is abundantly clear what he thinks about it at the end of this paragraph. All right, so we're gonna come back to David's review on Lil Pump in a little bit, but let's go take a look at our next interactive. So remember, I asked you to think about something that you wanted to review. Now, a lot of you put sort of like larger subject areas, restaurants, movies, books. I want you once again to think about something you'd like to review, but please think about something specific. So if it is a restaurant, think about a restaurant that you've ordered out or dined in very recently. And what we're going to ask you to do is respond to the following chat. Based on what you said you wanted to review, write a sentence that expresses your opinion on this. So we're trying to write that critical opinion and maybe remind us about what it is that you were reviewing. So again, based on what you said you wanted to review, write a sentence that expresses your opinion.
I'm just going to
Okay, so we're starting to have some. Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
Go ahead. I just saw a really fun one. Where did it go? Campground wash grounds can really make or break your camping experience. And yes, I have experienced that myself, and that gives us a good sense of how you feel about those washrooms.
Yep. The Donut King is a study in sweet perseverance. I like that one. All right. And any others before we move on? Brutalist architecture should be preserved, even though many people hate it.
Yeah, these are going so fast I can't read all of them, but I'm seeing some really good. I'm seeing people sort of mimic what the student did and balance that. What maybe is not great about it, but then in the end, what their opinion is that, hey, this is worth doing still, or worth seeing. Oh, Grand Budapest Hotel is a modern epic classic. Yeah, these are great. And I've seen some people frame them as questions too, some really creative things there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so obviously in a review, you want to express your critical opinion, but you also want to make an argument with descriptive details. And we spoke to John Pirellis. He's the chief popular music critic at the New York Times. And he talked to us a little bit about making an argument with descriptive details. So let's take another look and a listen to John Pirellis.
I always imagine, first of all, a very impatient reader. It's like, what do I need to tell this reader first? What's the most important thing? What grabbed my attention about what I'm reviewing? And how can I transmit that excitement to somebody who's reading it? I always think of my reader could be playing video games. My reader could be, taking a walk in the park. It's like my reader really needs to be grabbed and held by what I'm writing. So you want to communicate your excitement about what you're writing. And then sometimes the best way to start is with the detail, is with something you've heard that illuminates the rest of the music. Sometimes it might be, who is this person? Why am I reading about them? Just a couple of sentences. Sometimes it's, when I heard this album, it knocked me off my feet. Why? I don't like to put myself in reviews. I don't like I in a review, but you want to communicate why you're excited about it. You want to communicate what's interesting about it. You want to communicate what's unique. And if sound is very tricky to describe. So if hearing the sound makes you see something, hearing the sound makes you feel something, hearing the sound reminds you of your favorite dish, explain that, get that excitement across, get that reader to perceive the music the way you're perceiving it.
Natalie, anything you'd want to add?
I mean, I think this skill is so important for review writing. I saw somebody else put this in the chat, but his first line of imagining an impatient reader is such a good suggestion to really get down to those details that are the most important to the piece. And this is especially important in our review contest, where you only have 450 words to sort of explain your opinion. So really using those words wisely and thinking about really specific details that illustrate your point. Those are the things that help an audience decide, is this a song that I want to listen to? Is this a restaurant I should go to? Is this a movie I want to see? And that's the whole point of a review.
Okay, so speaking of reviewing music, we're going to go back to David's review on Lil Pump, an exercise in genius stupidity. Okay, so in this, we again invite you to identify some of the things that David says in his review that help make an argument with descriptive detail. So see how many you can find as I read. That said, while the nutrition label on a jar of mayonnaise may be more clever than this album, it's still an enjoyable listen. And therein lies the true genius of Lil Pump and other rappers of his ilk. Their lyricism may not be amazing, but their tracks are downright fun. On Lil Pump, that shines through in the energy of the beats and delivery of every track. The song Youngest Flexer is a perfect example of this. Every line features Pump bragging about his ability to afford expensive brands, but the partnership of Pump's passionate delivery and an energetic beat featuring laser noises and xylophones will make you incapable of getting the phrase, "I'm the youngest flexer," out of your head. So Natalie, what sticks out? Any descriptive details that caught your eye here?
So you can see in this paragraph, I think this is about the third paragraph into the essay, where he's really starting to develop his claim more. He sort of restates it in a different way at the top of this paragraph, saying, while the nutrition label on a jar of mayonnaise may be more clever than this album, it's still enjoyable. So again, maybe not the most genius thing you've ever heard, but it's still worth listening to. And the specific details he goes into here are the lyrics and the beat of the music. And he uses really fun metaphors throughout to illustrate his point. And another thing he does really well here is he gives an example of a specific song. So those are the kind of descriptive details that we're really looking for in this contest that get specific and help you understand what is good about this album or what is bad about it.
All right, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to another really important element of writing reviews, and that is using sensory images.
I'll just explain really quick what we mean by sensory images.
Yeah.
This is an element that's really crucial to review writing, is language that really pops. So these are details that are going to make the reader really get a sense of the thing that you're reviewing. And it should be engaging and fun because you want whoever's reading your review to keep reading. So one way to do that, when we say sensory images, we sort of mean language that draws on all the reader's senses. So sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, those different things. So think about that when you're doing the next prompt that Ross is introducing.
Okay, so now that we have a better idea of sensory images, let's go back to our interactive. So in the group chat, we want you to rewrite the following sentence to include sensory images. So the sentence is, the cake was bad. Now see if you can rewrite it to include some more sensory images, maybe make it a little bit interesting. We'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay, I'm seeing the rainbow lightness of the cake was not enough to make up for its leaden heaviness.
I saw something that said, it looked like a sunny day, but it tasted like a trash can. Love those similes. A lot of people saying it tasted like chalk, which I like that. Again, it's another image that just, that gritty taste in your mouth. Ugh.
Mm-hmm. There was no pot of gold at the end of this rainbow cake. All right. So why don't we take another look at a different review, which is, of course, about food. So this is a review by Emily Tian. It's called China Canteen, a humble shrine to the Sichuan kitchen. So let's take a quick look at what Emily wrote. And again, we're going to invite you to see if you can identify any sensory images. The Sichuan fish is electric. The filleted tilapia simmers under a blistery rain of peppers. Its spiced bombed fragrance, lightened by bean sprouts, infuses the room. Our neighbors turn to ask us what we ordered. And Natalie, as folks are taking a look at this, anything that stuck out to you?
The blistery rain of peppers, and the fish is electric. The spice bombed fragrance, like all of those images are so strong. And that's what we're looking for, because reading this, I really get a sense of what kind of food is served at this restaurant and whether or not I want to eat it. Again, that's the point of the review, is to help people make decisions. And plus, it's just fun to read. So metaphors, similes, strong verbs, vivid images, these are the difference between a good review and a really great one that you want to keep going.
Yeah, the line about our neighbors turn to ask us what we ordered, that's, I don't know, for me, like I feel like I've won when I'm in a restaurant and somebody's like, what did you order? And it gives me that idea that, you know, she's in there, she's ordered something really exciting, everybody's sort of talking about it. She did a really great job here. All right, so let's move on to the final element, and this is key element 4, consider your audiences. So let's take a listen to one more New York Times critic, and that is Maya Phillips. She's an arts critic fellow at the New York Times, and she talked to us about writing with an audience in mind. So let's take another look and a listen, and then we'll discuss.
If it's your first time writing a review, it's good to remember that it is just a piece of persuasive writing. You're just giving your opinion and persuading your reader of why you think that way. So just think of your basic essay structures. You want to have your thesis up top. You want to have a nut graph, will have the details of what you're going to get into, and just outline your points and make the reader understand where you're coming from. Even if they don't have to agree, they just have to understand how you got to the opinion that you have about this piece of work.
Okay, so that was Maya Phillips, an arts critic fellow at the New York Times. And she brings us back to that point about you're writing a persuasive essay, which I think students are very familiar with doing. So can you talk to us about maybe a little bit about what Maya said, but then tell us what we mean by audiences? Yeah,
so like Maya said, your audience is so important in a review. It's important in any type of writing, but it's especially important in a review because you're helping them make a decision. So for a review, you kind of have this extra challenge because you're looking at two different audiences. So the first one is the general audience. Who are you writing this for? Where is this piece going to be published or featured? So, for example, if you're writing a review of one of the Harry Potter movies for a Harry Potter fan site, you can assume that your audience knows the background of the films, the characters, etc. You can use really obscure references, and you can safely assume that they're going to know what you're talking about. But if you're writing for a broader audience, like the New York Times, which for this contest, students are writing for that audience, you're going to have to spend a little extra time explaining those things to give your reader some context and to help them understand, like Maya said, where you're coming from. But another thing you have to keep in mind is the target audience. Who is the audience of the creative work that you are writing? So maybe you're not into fantasy. You don't think wizards are all that interesting. No offense to the Harry Potter fans. But the point of the review is not just to express your opinion and say whether you like it, but it's really to figure out if the target audience, someone who actually does like Harry Potter, would they like this movie? So our mentor text for this skill can really help students discern between those two types of audiences and walk the line of appealing to them both.
I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, especially because I'm sure so many students are going to be reviewing, niche movies, books, really anything that there's, a specific group that's interested in it, but they're writing with a much broader audience in mind. And our critics are going to talk a little bit more about this. With that in mind, we're going to spend just the last few minutes gaining some advice and best practices from New York Times critics on writing reviews. So we've already been introduced to Maya Phillips and John Pirellis and A.O. Scott. We're also going to hear from Jennifer Zalai, a nonfiction book critic at the New York Times. I spoke to them with Callie Holterman, also from the Learning Network, and they had a lot of really great things to say. So let's take one final look and listen to the New York Times critics on their review writing tips.
My name is Jennifer Zalai, and I am the nonfiction book critic for the New York Times.
I'm A.O. Scott. I'm one of two chief film critics.
My name is Maya Phillips. I'm the arts critic fellow, and I cover mostly theater, but I also write about movies, TV, basically anything.
I'm John Pirellis. I'm the chief pop music critic of the New York Times, and anything musical, that's what I review.
The best thing to remember when writing reviews is to just trust your gut. If you have a visceral reaction to something, whether it's really positive or really negative, it's just lean into that.
You should try as much as possible to trust yourself.
It's like the conversation you have after you saw the movie with your friend. Did you like it? Didn't you like it? What part? This part was really funny. This part was really boring. That actor was great. That actor was terrible. All of that is the material of the review. The extra challenge is that you may be talking to a friend who didn't see the movie.
Think about writing for your mom. Think about writing for your teacher. Think about writing for someone who isn't into what you are into, but would really enjoy it or would really be persuaded to dislike it.
One of the most important things that you have to do, and one of, in a way, the hardest things, the thing that takes a certain amount of work and writing discipline to do, is to describe what the movie was. Not just to say what you thought about it, but to describe it so that someone who hasn't seen it will have an idea of what it is.
But at the same time, don't go overboard on that, because I think it can sometimes be very easy to sort of get caught up in trying to give every detail, and then you don't have any room for your own opinion or your own voice.
Chop out everything that feels indulgent, chop out everything that feels tangential, chop out everything but getting to the point.
Very little kids will do this. They'll tell you, and then he went to this, and then he went to this, and then, oh, but I forgot to tell you that before that he did this. And that isn't really very helpful or very interesting.
A 450-word review is kind of like a 3-minute pop song. Every note should tell you something. Every note should advance what you're saying.
I love descriptions. I love using colorful language. And I think in general, as a writer, making sure you're not repeating things, not using cliches, but really using your imagination.
And not only by using adjectives like wonderful, fantastic, fascinating, that's sort of, that's a bit of a cheap writer's move. What you want to do is convey some of your excitement, some of your enthusiasm, And sometimes that's negative. Sometimes you really don't like something.
Not just I can't stand this, I hate his voice, but what about his voice do you hate? What about the lyrics do you think are dumb? Just like go into it and be analytical.
When I think about voice and tone in writing, I actually think it's really important.
And what's really fun to do is you can match your tone to the tone of the piece.
And if you're writing about a drama in which, very dramatic and serious things happen and deep emotions are used, you don't necessarily want to be funny and make jokes and be flippant.
But say you're writing about some kind of cartoon comedy, then you can feel free to use some more zany language.
Somebody who will often be introducing the world to a work that they haven't seen yet or read yet is that you do have a responsibility, I would say, to be fair. You are trying as much as possible to understand what the writer of the book was trying to do, and then, making your case about whether or not they did it, if they did it well, if they didn't do it well. So I think that that's also something that it's good to keep in mind.
I think you want to make the experience enjoyable to the reader, and you want to make the experience enjoyable for yourself too.
Writing is work, and it takes work, but it also should be and can be a lot of fun. It should never feel like a chore. It should always feel like a pleasure.
This should be a fun assignment, I think. And you get to really show yourself in a way that you might not be able to in other papers.
Okay, so hopefully many of you are excited to introduce review writing to your students or tell them about this contest. And at the very least, we hope you have a lot of really good review writing tips. So Natalie, these 4 critics covered a lot. Any final thoughts that you'd want to add in here about this contest, about writing reviews?
I think the main thing is what Maya and AO said at the end, is that this assignment should really be fun. Students get to choose what they review, and within review writing, there's so much room for creativity. There's opportunities to experiment with language and form, and it's just a different way for students to express themselves and the things that they care about. And that's really what we want them to be able to do in this contest and in this unit.
All right. Well, again, Natalie, thank you so much for joining us today, telling us more about this contest, telling us about review writing. I think the people who have been watching this webinar really got a lot out of it. So thank you so much.
Yep. And thank you all here for being here and participating. I enjoyed it.
And so once again, we would like to thank everybody for joining us. We'd like to thank Natalie. We'd like to thank A.O. Scott. We'd like to thank Maya Phillips, John Pirellis, Jennifer Zalai, and our student winners as well, all for helping us put this webinar together. So the New York Times Learning Network webinars are produced by myself, Callie Holterman, and Rachel Manley. And again, this is Ross Flatt. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time. Take care.